You know what's wonderful? I've worked with Julian for many, many years. And I always go second. It's the story of my life. I'm always second.
All the time somebody will say he's a second. In reality, you know not.
And the other thing is, I never know what he's going to say. So he said some of the things I wanted to say. But no, what I will do now, if I may, thank you, is take apart a little bit in detail, look at the basic points that Julian was making, and illustrate with a few little pictures how important it is that we give children a chance to experience the things that Julian was talking about. How important it is for our children to have contact with nature. How important it is for them to be allowed to get wet and to get dirty, and to learn to deal with the everyday risks that they will cope with, they have to cope with in later life. Let me rearrange the furniture first, in case I wave my arms around. So, anxious parents mean anxious children. Now, I'm not blaming parents for this. Maybe I would blame public policy for this, but this is the situation we're in as we see it now. They're concerned about these type of things. Stranger danger, this is another question, and very irrational thoughts about stranger danger usually. They're worried about children having accident and becoming injured. They're worried about traffic, and people talked about this, how we have to manage traffic to have more human environments in cities. And they're also worried about children getting wet and dirty and then suffering illnesses for that. Let me try and deal with some of these things over the next time and talk about how in Scotland we have tried to move things forward to deal with some of these problems. I apologize that the slides are in English, but you will maybe realize that I'm from Scotland, and English is also a second language for me. So here's a quote from Richard Louv from a book called Last Child in the Woods. And we were in Play Scotland, we were privileged to have him over as a speaker in Edinburgh at the beginning of the month, and he is the man that coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. And in fact, some years later, it's maybe 10 years since he wrote this book, it's interesting the medical profession has adopted this term, and in fact, for some conditions, they are prescribing nature as rather than drugs as the answer, including things like ADHD, spectrum disorders, and so on. It's really important. If we look at the statistics, they're pretty horrific. There are children in America between the ages of 6 and 13 spending 8 hours on screens. Well, I exaggerate. 7 hours and 18 minutes is what the report said. There are percentage of children that never go out alone, even up to the age of 13. Never go out alone. In Scotland, there was a statistic that children are spending more time on the toilet than they are going outside. Some of the reason is their parents have restricted their screen time, so they take their iPad into the toilet and spend more time in there, I'm sure. Hundreds of thousands of years, we have been in contact with nature on a daily basis, until recently, in evolutionary terms. And how important it is, therefore, that we look at the absolute basics, how we can get in touch with the fact that we have within us still, in this society where we're not going outside enough, we're not in contact with nature enough, how important it is for us to return to looking at how those evolutionary drivers are so important. If you also think that the amount of time that people spend indoors, I'm talking about adults and children, some of them spending 90% of their time indoors, and you look at the difference in air quality between indoors and outdoors, this also gives us a significant problem. It's not always possible, especially in cities, to bring children to nature, so we have to bring the nature to children. So let's look at some of the absolute basics following on from what Julian said. A good start would be to look at the elements. There is innate curiosity of children about the world, and we are prohibiting them by lack of access from dealing with this, letting this innate curiosity find a way forward. If you look at the first element, water. If I asked you around to say what the qualities of water are, you'd probably all give me different examples. It was really gratifying to hear the children talk about water, 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 because it is the most playable of all the elements. It has the most characteristics that stimulate the senses. You can hear the water dropping. You can see the water. You can see the reflections in the water. You can taste the water. So it has a good result, a good possibility for all the senses. But most of all, it brings social play. Julian talked about playing together. This situation here just shows these two children. Children go and play with water and make friends with people that they didn't know before. And if we talk about inclusion, you should have water play. Because in order for some of the things to work, when you've got dams and Archimedes screws and pumps and all sorts of things, you need the children to work together to make it work. So they will work together, and suddenly they'll come home from the park and say, oh, I made a new friend today. Especially when we're talking about children with special needs. In all the surveys that we've done about children with special needs and their parents, there are three things that are constantly at the top of the list. One, car parking. How do we get there? Two, toilets and changing places so we can stay there longer. Otherwise, you know, if you see a woman saying to a community boss, a mayor, why should I change my child with cerebral palsy on the floor of the toilet? You know, they need changing places as well as toilets. It was interesting as well to hear the children this morning. They talked about toilets and cafes and kiosks, didn't they? Why is that? Because they want to stay there. They anticipate in the playground they will stay there a long time. So they need toilets and they need somewhere to get a drink. And they wouldn't say that about synthetic playgrounds because they'll only be there 10 or 15 minutes. But in the playgrounds they want, they will be there a long time. So the water, a good example about water, it's the most, I'm in trouble now, excuse me. I'll take this one. Otherwise I'll make too much mess and I'll get in trouble with the organizers. Yeah. As well as the other properties, the wonderful thing about water is it's a complete contradiction. It is predictable. It will level. It will always level. Although it will always run downhill. Although I've seen some very embarrassing planning mistakes where the architect thought different. So it's very predictable. But at the same time, I'll drink some. If I throw this across the room, that is completely unpredictable. I don't know any computer that would be able to work out how that was going to fall. And that's the joy. And if you look to the next element, earth and water, that is the joy. The children all the time, things they can manipulate will give them endless joy. Because it's unpredictable. They try a new channel. A child talked today about damming. They will dam something and see the dam break, and they will try and build it stronger. The water will lead them in the direction. They will be absorbed in the play that they're doing at the time. As well as all the things that Julian said about the mud going in through the fingers and up through the toes and so on. And this, for us, a play area without water is not a play area. Interesting, I think, Tim, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, one of the best play areas in London one year was decided, it wasn't even a playground, was it? It was this piazza with the water fountains coming up. Yes, and that was voted the best playground in London, and it wasn't even built as a playground. It was just the fact it was an architectural square with water spouts coming up. There's another one in Paris, I think, where the water rises in a very shallow area and then drops down. And it's always full of children. Let's look at the next element. And this is a picture from Prague, actually, I think. Prague 10. Oh, close. And this is sort of colonized by older kids. Very often playgrounds in situations, children turn up at 13, 14, 15, they say there's nothing for me. If you give them very active offers, then they will be happy about this, even though they say they're not playing. Here the situation, if you remember, I can just about remember the feeling of the wind going through your hair. But this is another lovely sensory experience. People love swinging on big, long swings because the idea of the air movement past us. So air is a very important element to think about. Big, long movements, the idea of the wind going past. We have seen these very high, very long swings that take a lot of hard work to get going because of the long pendulum action. And girls in particular like these swings, it seems, teenage girls. So the last element, and very often the most difficult to deal with, is fire. Now, even though I've put up a still picture there of fire, I'm sure you will feel something about your human's connection with fire. If I start the video, and this should be fun. No, let's go back. How do I start the video, please? Sorry? Does he? Can you start the video for me, please? Ah, yeah, coming, yeah, nearly. Yeah, no. There. So now if it becomes a video of a fire, you even feel more connection, and you're not even feeling any heat. There's a fundamental attraction. We must somehow use fire in play to help our children manage to deal with fire. Less and less children have contact with fire in their everyday life and know how to manage it. Julian and I got in trouble once in Northern Ireland when we tried to demonstrate this in a room, in a public building. And he took a piece of paper and he wrapped it up and he got a match and he lit the thing just to demonstrate. If you hold the paper this way, it burns quite slow. And if you hold the paper this way, it burns fast. Now, that's a very good lesson for children. They learn it. There's not real danger of getting burnt with a piece of paper. But unfortunately, when he did this and then this, the fire alarm went off. Because it was a public building, within 3 minutes, there was a fire brigade outside. So we're not allowed to do it anymore. Life's no fun, is it, Julian? So the problem is, people worry often, if we expose our children to these elements, will they get hurt, will they get wet, will they get dirty? Well, let's look at some of those aspects. First of all, thank you. First of all, children love getting dirty. Okay, this is Scottish children enjoying themselves outside. But look, I don't know if you had the same advertisement on television. These children are imitating an advert for shampoo, where the woman in the advert has long hair and she puts it and then she throws her head back, and these children were imitating this advert. The children love it. They love the permission to play in such a way. So, where am I going now? Oh, try the right way around. You realize, oops, sorry, that Julian and I are not the best with technology, so yeah, just a little bit better. Not so long ago, I read this book called Let Them Eat Dirt. It's written by 2 Canadian microbiologists, and both parents, interestingly, and they have been studying the effect on humans about the problem of our world being a little bit too sanitized. Now, there's no question that antibiotics have done us a lot of good. For example, infant mortality has gone down on average from 150 per 1,000 to about 5 per 1,000. Some diseases are virtually eradicated. There's no question about the benefits. But some of those changes are not so positive. Antibiotics also have a negative effect on the microbes that we need inside our bodies to deal with things. Not only immunity protection, but even digestion. For example, there are in our gut some microbes that digest some things that are harder to digest. And if we don't have these because they've been killed off by overuse of antibiotics, then we eat well, but then we still feel hungry. Because these microbes are sending a message to the brain, this gut-brain link, telling us we haven't had enough to digest. So as well as the increase in all these other things here, it's also now connected with obesity. And what they've done is highlighting the dangers to children from overprotection with infection control. And overprotection, overemphasis on cleanliness rather than hygiene. So, this is what they're saying. I'll let you read it, I hope it's okay. We are preventing their immune system from maturing the way that they have for millions of years before us, with lots and lots of microbes. We depend on these army of microbes to protect us against germs, break down food, release energy, and produce vitamins. So what I'm saying is, in this little picture, and most of the pictures I use are my children, by the way, because we always have difficulty with permission with photos and everything. So I look upon these pictures fondly. Examples of children getting wet and getting dirty. It's good for them. Okay, when they come in, you've got to wash your hands and so on, but that's, you don't have to wash your hands 10 times a day. You don't have to use antibacterial stuff. You just use soap and water. We have to allow them to get in amongst the elements and get wet and get dirty. Let's now turn to risk. As far as I'm concerned, without the risk, there is absolutely no learning. And I think these slides, when I tell you about these pictures, it will show that the children are quite good at doing their own, without having been on any courses, doing their own risk-benefit analysis. It's something that's in them. They are competent. These children we saw today are competent. Let me give you an example, and I don't know how this is going to work. Helena, I've known you a long time, so I can get on my knees beside you, can't I? No, I'm not going to propose, it's okay. If I'm a baby that's not yet walking, and one day, as you know, you'll all know, you pull up on your hands, and you pull up on the couch, and then you're standing. And the parents rush to get a camera so they can put it on Facebook or something daft like that. Then you're standing there, okay? You're one, and you're standing there. And you get a stable position. Okay, I'm stable. Now, without risk, I will never walk. Because if I take a step now, I will fall over. It's as basic as that. So I have to make a decision. Do I stand here for the next 40 years? Or do I go to an unstable position? Stable, unstable, stable, and then I'm walking. Okay, my center of gravity is low, so it doesn't really hurt when I fall over. But it's as important as that. And through these pictures, and interesting, they're all girls. Through these pictures, I'll show you some absolute clear examples. This child on the way to the playground, on the way to the beach, walking along this wall. On one side, here you can see, is a road without pavement and a single road with cars. This side there is a little stream, 1.20 meter drop on the other side. Normally you're walking, the first time you go down, you're walking along holding the hand of the child. And one day the child will say, you won't say, the child will say, get off, get away, I want to do it on my own. I can do it myself. The child decides, not the parent. Okay, the parent will stay a bit close for the first few times, but they've decided. That's a risk-benefit assessment. They can see the wall's wide enough, stable enough. The benefit is, I can do it myself. Risk-benefit assessment. Second example. This girl, not many would do this. This girl has climbed on this breakwater. It'll probably be wet and slippy, but she's decided a challenge. The challenge is to get to the other end without falling off. She will go step by step. What if she slips and falls? I guarantee she's decided beforehand what to do. She won't fall with her arms up in the air like a footballer, trying to get a penalty. She will have decided, if I fall, I will jump down I will bend my knees to take the shock, and she'll say, I've done it many times before. She's done a risk-benefit assessment, and the benefit is, look, I've conquered the breakwater. Here is this last case here, my home village in the southwest of Scotland. They're jumping off this rock, which is in the middle of the harbour. It's called the Dawn Rock. You can see the height relative to the children. These are teenage children. This water here, we have a high tide. But sometimes it's just under 1 meter, sometimes it's 4.5 meters. So they don't just suddenly decide to jump one day to jump off the top of the rock. They take their time, they learn, and they talk to each other. They know about the tides. One benefit for children living by the sea, especially, Tim, in our village, these children have quite a lot of independent mobility. And it's partly to do with the fact they're living in a dangerous place with high tides and jaggy rocks, and they learn about the weather coming because it always comes from the west. And it's also partly in small communities, there's still a collective responsibility on adults for children. So this helps independent mobility. So what do? They talk amongst themselves, they say this, or they start jumping from here. But I'll show you on the next slide. Sorry, I missed one. Yeah, this is a good one. Maybe there's a slide missing. Oh, no. A little bit out of order, but that doesn't matter. Excuse me. Anyway, I'll maybe come back to it. But you get the point. They know about the depths of water. They started. Some of the children will never jump from the top. And interesting, when tourists come, and the children come there, there's a knowledge exchange. The tourist children start asking the local children, how deep is the water? Is it okay? What about the rocks? The other children say, don't just jump down, jump out and down, because there's not a, because of the slope of the rock. So these children are not only doing a risk-benefit assessment, they're passing on it to their neighbours, and all without adults being there at all. The adults are too frightened to watch. So we go to this next slide anyway. I know it's a horrible picture, but it just makes you look a little bit more and not fall asleep. This is important from the Chief Medical Officer in Scotland. In a report that was done by all the chief medical officers of the UK nations. Sometimes people say, what about this, and what about this, and what about they break their arm? Yeah, okay, that's a problem for the next 6 weeks. But much greater problem is the children that are being inactive and the poor health that will result from later on. More children in the UK go to hospital from falling out of bed than do from falling out of trees. Maybe the beds are too high. Maybe they should have safety surfacing on the bedroom floor. This is the slide I've clearly put out of order. I would like this one in a video again, please. This shows you, this is nearby the rock, but they don't just jump from the top of the rock. They come, oh. Were you feeling cold? Did you want a little bit? They gradually go up the steps. Can I manage the next step? Can I manage the next step? Can I manage the next step? Some children never go to the top step. They decide it's enough for me. They have decided their own limitations. I can't remember an accident from children. It's a sort of rite of passage in the village for children. This boy is 10 and a half. There's a rite of passage for children to do this, both boys and girls, and they learn to do it in this way. The accidents that we do remember in the village are stupid adults trying to pretend they're children, and they do it, and then the ambulance comes. Sometimes even have a drink first, and then they do it. So, let's show you another very basic example. I love showing pictures of these children. This is one of the questions that children ask is the water cold? Of course it's cold. It's always cold in Scotland. Here is in Greece, and this is a child jumping, first time in this beach, jumping to her grandma. Okay, so, taking care. A day later, only a day later, again, a video, please. And it's the last one, I promise. A day later, this child, 4 years old, has decided it's time to do it myself. Okay? Shoes on so the rocks are not so slippy. Taking it easy, checking everything's okay, and wallop. all she was worried about was losing her hat. Okay? But again, risk assessing, knows about the water, knows I can do it, did it nearly with grandma, now I'll do it myself. Okay, next please. We can deal with that, thank you. So, Julian coined a phrase many, many years ago, as much play value as possible, but only as much safety as necessary. We have to let children find their own way. Children will find that level. If we don't give them challenge, like in this situation, in a school in Hanover, where they can climb to 5 meters high, but not all do it. Some decide it's not for me. Some are very fit and do it all the time. Children will make their own little risk situations. I just skip to a question about inclusion. Sorry. This is a child in North Dublin, in Ireland, came to there on a wheelchair. This surface, by nobody's criteria, is called accessible for wheelchairs. But sometimes we don't just have to make it really boring for children with wheelchairs. They also want a challenge. And this boy was lifted by his mother and his carer onto this little digger on the sand, and they were crying. He stayed there for 20, 25 minutes, and it was the first time he had ever played at the center of attention of a group of children. But of course, it's not accessible. But you know, obstacles are also have to be overcome, and children with all needs need a little bit of challenge, whatever their capabilities. So, this is not just the words, the thinking of people like Julian and myself, but it's also in the UK and Scotland. It's based, this idea of balancing the risk with the activity, with the benefit, is based on a number of things. First of all, United Nations Convention Rights of the Child, this Article 31 that you've heard about before, talks about the opportunity to experience and manage risk. The law, there was a very important case, very sad case in England, where a teenage boy, I think 14 years old, something like this, older, thanks Tim, there was an old gravel pit, and they made it a leisure area. And they filled it with water, and they made it a place to go for swimming and picnicking and so on. There was a spit of land going out, and this boy, never been there before, he ran along the land, thought the water was deep, and he dived in and he broke his neck. It wasn't deep. So it goes to this court, and the next court, and the next court, and so on. And basically, his lawyers were saying there should have been a warning sign, no diving or something like this. So they sued the council, the community, for not having proper signs up there when it was a community facility, I suppose. But it went to the highest court, it's House of Lords, it's our Supreme Court, and this was one of the things that the judges said. There are many evil consequences if you work on a culture of blame and compensation. The point was, he said, if we stop all these accidents by making everything safer and safer and safer, you make the world a grey place for everybody. It's very unfortunate, but it can't really affect public policy when we look to children. Along with the likelihood of the accident happening, the frequency and the severity of the injury, you have to counterbalance the social value element. I know you had people, sorry we couldn't be here yesterday, we got delayed, but I know you had people yesterday talking about the European standard. And very often it's used as a reason for not doing this and not doing that. But if you look to the introduction and the scope of the standard, it also talks in the same way. This stuff here. Risk is there, some degree of this may be of benefit. The aim of the standard is to protect children from serious harm. Nicola mentioned this yesterday. What is serious harm? Basically something you can't repair. You know, of course, things like strangulation, fatalities is top of the list, but loss of an eye, loss of a finger, something that you can't repair is what you consider serious injury. And this is what they're saying, disabling or fatal consequences. This is the context of the standard, not to prevent you cutting your knee or even breaking your arm. This is the aim of the standard, and I think people should remember this, whether it's in just a recommendation or whether it's enshrined in your law. I think this was mentioned again yesterday. This policy, law and standards went on to a position. The UK Safety Forum did this managing risk in play provision. Then you can generate, as in these pictures, which is in a school ground in Hanover, again, how this allows children to develop self-confidence, the awareness of their own limitations, and develop that important thing that Julian was talking about, self-protecting behaviour. This was also incorporated by the UK's Health and Safety Executive, the authority that looks after, it's a sort of quasi-government body that looks after health and safety throughout the land, whether it's a chemical factory or a schoolyard, or a public playground, sorry. And they talked about a balanced approach to looking at this question of safety, and how to use risk-benefit assessment as a suitable and sufficient and proportionate response to these questions. And look at this one. This even when there's a risk of fatal or permanent injury, sometimes you have to say that is tolerable. Now, of course, it's not tolerable for the family of the child that suffers. But what's the alternative? We never let children play with water, just in case. There's a very, very small situation. The likelihood is very, very low. The hazard is apparent, and children benefit from playing with the element. And this is the Health and Safety Executive saying this, not just a voluntary body or something. They're responsible for safety in the land. So let's just finish up. What do we try to do in Scotland to change things? Well, first, about this balance of risk and play value, and safety and play value. One thing is to lower expectations. If you say, we have in the city the safest playgrounds in the country, you are more or less legally hanging yourself because you've said they're safe, and there will be an accident. And the parents say, you said it was safe. And don't forget, no child ever went to a playground because it was safe. Like no child ever went to a playground because it was tidy. So here's an example in the north of Scotland, in a castle. We did a natural play area, and we made a sign for them at the beginning. And the sign said this. This is for small children, you know. This is just mainly made from things we found around the estate. But we talked about, this is a way, we talked to parents, and it's mainly small children that come here. This is where young children can start to explore their environment if they don't live in the country, to start learning to manage risk outdoors. So all these things, obvious different surfaces, allow them to understand the textures of nature. Yeah, okay, they may have a few cuts and grazes, but the benefit is so great. So immediately the parents' expectations, they might fall over, we might have to go and get a plaster to put on a cut on their knee. You've lowered expectations. Same in the Princess Diana Memorial Park in London. They had this placard. Risks are intentionally provided so your children can learn to manage those risks. So you're stating up front, yes, you come here not to be perfectly safe, but to learn to manage the risk in a relatively safe environment. So that's one thing that can be done. The next thing, make it a health matter. This is a former chief medical officer in Scotland. He said, play is a health matter. It's the most important thing we can do for our children to ensure better health and well-being in Scotland for children. He then gave £4 million from his health promotion budget for play projects. So make it a health matter. Then, I'm not disagreeing with Tim, what Tim said yesterday, people not politics, but I'm saying make it a political matter as well. Now, we are fortunate in Scotland. We're a small country. Yeah, we're a small country with a new parliament, 20 years old. We have good access to our members of the Scottish Parliament. We can go and talk to direct ministers. When a new minister comes, Minister for Young Children, within 2 weeks we get to see them. It's a small country. We can go and say, listen, if you're not going to talk to me, I know your mother, so I'm going to have a word with her instead, and she'll sort you out. And this is important. This is a statement from a former Minister for Children and Young People. And we had a debate in the Scottish Parliament on play that lasted 1 hour, and every single party spoke about their childhood experiences. So this resulted in the Scottish Government developing a play strategy, but more importantly, a play strategy implementation plan, which said in 3 months we want to do this, in 1 year we want to do this, in 5 years we want to do this. And they paid Play Scotland, the play organisation in Scotland, a grant to manage and drive that implementation. The third thing I would say is make it everybody's business. Some of these things have been alluded to in the last couple of days, I'm sure. Play is not just for play workers. Play is not just for the leisure and parks department. Play is everybody's business. And part of this plan, this play map is a resource for community planning partnership. Every community has to have a community planning partnership with all the disciplines in the council sitting there and talking about play. The engineers, the road people, the planners, the architects all have to talk about play and all have to produce a document about that. And it all has to be driven. I think this is important. One of your hub points, Tim, was a senior person must be in charge of this to bring it all together. And that's part of the community planning. So, and then developing also from the plan, the Care Inspectorate, conscious of time, sorry about this, the Care Inspectorate inspect 9,000 premises, kindergartens, nurseries, children in care in Scotland, 250,000 children involved. Because of this play strategy, they changed the situation from one of inspection, is it clean, is it good, is it safe, is it this, to a load of values. And they produced this document expecting that children in these organisations should spend more time outdoors. And here's the list of what they said would happen. And they are consistently scoring higher the nurseries and the kindergartens that have allow the children to play more outdoors, allow them to manage risk and getting, learning to deal and getting wet and getting dirty. By far, the results of these gardens are having a better emphasis on the quality of the life of children. And also the same organisation, the Care Inspectorate, talked about stepping back from obsession with infection control in a document called Animal Magic. And let's not get obsessed with saying children can't bring pets into school, can't do this, can't go and feed the chickens. Follow normal hygiene regulations, but also don't be obsessed with it. Find a balanced approach to this as well. Now, we are in trouble in Scotland because we're bringing more and more testing into schools. Yeah, I'm conscious of time. More and more testing in schools. And I have a different test that should be applied to first school kids, and it's this one. I'm using Mark Twain's quote, don't let school interfere with your education. And play-based learning is now being a fundamental part of the way we deal with our children up to 7. And this is what we should test them on. How many bruises and scratches have you got? How much dirt have you got under your toenails? This is a good test to see whether the children are being brought up properly. So obviously I've taken up my time, and that's the finish. Please, 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 take that leap of faith. Allow your children to exercise their own competence, which is really, as we've heard from these children today, quite high. Thank you very much.
Tak já bych se chtěla zeptat, jak probíhá vlastně to hodnocení přínosného rizika nebo ten risk-benefit assessment vlastně v praxi. Kdo ho hodnotí, jestli to je ten vlastně certifikátor v případě, že se jedná o herní prvek, nebo jestli je to tak, že třeba se ve Skotsku hodnotí i celý herní prostory z pohledu tohohle hlediska, nebo jak to probíhá? Děkuju.
I think maybe Tim would come in after me. Tim will come in after me, I'm sure, on this. If you take a kindergarten, for example, my answer would be the kindergarten workers do the assessment. And there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, they are there all the time with the children. The inspector comes in once a year, passes his verdict on the place, but the the nursery worker, the kindergarten worker, knows those individual children. This person comes in, parachuted in once a year, doesn't know the children. The kindergarten worker knows the children. They know this one's careful of this, and this one's, maybe we have to watch this. And one of the problems is, with these type of workers, their confidence is undermined by these so-called safety experts. They are the experts. So we should be saying to these workers, have confidence in your own competence and in your own judgment. So that's the first part of your question answered.
Mm-hmm. Děkuju. Ještě se k tomu tématu určitě dneska budeme několikrát vracet. Prostor pro další otázky. Komentáře tady vidím, si můžu poprosit mikrofon.
Dobrý den. Já jsem se chtěl zeptat, jak se konkrétně ve Skotsku řeší případný soudní spory, které vzniknou zraněním na hřišti, protože ten risk assessment je subjektivní a chci se zeptat, jak to vypadá v praxi, protože v tom já vidím třeba tady na tuzemském trhu problém. Já jsem příznivcem toho, to riziko ovlivnit, ale i díky zdejší korupci a nekultivovanosti prostředí, jako v západní Evropě, ten přístup asi by měl být trošku jiný, nebo chci se zeptat, jak to funguje v praxi.
Dobře, děkuji.
Okay, in the UK, basically the person that would sue would have to sue in what they call the law of negligence. The law of negligence talks about the duty of care. Did the person who organizes the play space take care when they were thinking about the play space? And there are other elements, but the first thing is a duty of care. And if you have properly looked at the situation and you have written down, perhaps it's always good to have something in writing, unfortunately, if you've written down, right, we are going to give children some risk, some challenge. There will be some problems. We'll deal with them. We'll eliminate the most serious dangers. But we will make it, like I said, with these notices, this is what we were saying, bring your children here. If you wrote down, I think everything is absolutely safe, you're in trouble if there's somebody sues you. But if you take the other attitude, and I think you mentioned yesterday, the Lady Allen's quote, better a broken bone than a broken spirit. There's playgrounds with this notice up, better than a broken bone than a broken spirit. And so slowly, we've changed away from this blame culture, as I said with one of the famous court cases in 2003, the idea, yeah, everybody can make it safe, but wouldn't it be really boring for everybody? So you have to balance, the courts will now balance the social value as against the other questions about how careful the person was in doing it. And slowly we change this. The courts have changed. The culture in some places hasn't changed because people worry that they're going to be taken to court. And this we'd say was sort of secondary safety. I'm going to do this to save myself, not to save somebody from injury. So I can't comment on your situation because I know nothing about the law and negligence in the Czech Republic.
Jo. Děkuju.